I want to get your reaction to the president's latest tweet. He said, unless Republicans have a death wish, and it is also the right thing to do, they must approve the $2,000 payments ASAP. $600 is not enough. What do you think? What's your response? I notice you're in the. There are 5 Republican senators that have come out in favor of increasing the payment from $600 to $2,000, but you are among that's 5 Republican senators. You're among the 47 Republican senators that have not.
Well, that's right, Jake, and I'm not going to, because I think it's a very bad idea. I mean, let's be clear about what we're talking about here. We're talking about sending checks, the vast majority of which will be going to people who've had no loss of income whatsoever. That's just a fact. How and why does that make any sense at all? Oh, and by the way, when you bring this direct payment up to $2,000, the total cost is almost 2/3 of $1 trillion. It's over $600 billion, most of which, I mean, the vast majority of which will go to people who had no lost income whatsoever. You know, this makes no sense. We're in a very different place today than we were back in March. And it was of dubious merit back in March. But then at least you could make the case that we actually had no economy. We had so completely shut down the economy that we were looking to send money as a substitute for the economy. Now we've got a very different situation. The economy grew at 33% last quarter. We've got very acute problems within certain employment groups, right? People who work for restaurants and hotels and travel and entertainment, devastated. But we do not have a global macroeconomic depression underway at all. So it makes no sense to be sending this out to everybody who has a pulse. Oh, by the way, you actually don't need a pulse. Anyone who died this year, dead people are going to get the checks too. I wonder if it's enough stimulus for them. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is.
Well, I guess I have a couple questions for you. One in policy and one procedure. On the policy level, you would agree that there are still millions of Americans suffering, people who have lost their jobs, who have lost income,
yeah,
who do need help. What would be a better way to help those people? I mean, you've seen the lines at the food banks all over Pennsylvania, I'm sure.
So, Jake, that's where we should be targeting. And so a lot of the bill that we voted for overwhelmingly does in fact target those very people. It's PPP loans, right, which are really grants to small businesses, provided that they keep their workforce employed. So people would continue to have a job because of that money who would otherwise not have a job. There's a plus up in unemployment benefits for people who are actually unemployed. There's an expansion of the eligibility for unemployment benefits to include people like the self-employed and gig workers who've historically not qualified. Those kinds of things make a lot of sense. And we could have a debate and a discussion about whether we should do even more for those things. But when you're talking about the 2-income couple who, let's say they both happen to work for the federal government, among the 2 million people who do, they've never had even an interruption in their income. They've had no lost income at all. And if they've got 2 kids, we're going to send them $8,000 of money we don't have. That just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so that's the policy question. The procedure question is, do you think Senate Majority Leader McConnell should offer a clean up or down bill, up or down vote on this issue of $600 to $2,000? I suspect that he might be thinking about other ways to kill it, because I think he agrees with you, such as adding that, you know, the provision to get rid of Section 230, which provides immunity to social media companies from posts that other people put on their sites. I mean, wouldn't a clean up or down vote be the better way to at least legislate this, even if you vote no?
So I don't think so, Jake. And the reason is because I think it makes much, much more sense, and there would be much broader support if this is actually targeted to people who need it. As I say, we don't have this money lying on the shelf. We're either going to print this money or we're going to borrow it from overseas. And either way, we ought to think long and hard about how we're doing this. When you know for a fact that the vast majority of it is going to go to people who've had no loss of income, I think that's indefensible. And so if there's a will to do more, then we ought to talk about how you do that in a sensible fashion where the money goes to people who actually need it. And we're not going to figure that out on a up or down vote that gets jammed in sometime this week.
So Obviously, President Trump says that your position is a death wish and the wrong thing to do. He also has been lashing out at Republican leaders for the vote to override the defense bill, calling House Republican leadership weak and tired. Now, a senior Republican told CNN that these rants are, quote, the ravings of a deposed king. How do you see these attacks on Republicans?
Look, I'm not very surprised about tweets that are critical of people who are overriding the president's veto. He doesn't like that prospect. I understand that. But I think that the defense authorization bill, which we have passed for 59 consecutive years, I don't think anyone ever considers it perfect. It is the result of a legislative process, which, by the way, this administration was involved in. And the president's big objections seem to be the provision that is going to require renaming of military facilities that are named after Confederates. Look, I think that amendment probably goes too far in the dynamic, but I don't have a problem with renaming military bases against people who did not commit treason and take up arms against the United States. So I don't object to that idea. And the idea that Section 230 should be repealed. Look, I think that's an important, complicated issue, but that legal liability protection that we granted to these internet companies years ago really enabled spectacular growth in a whole new industry that has done so much for our economy. Is it being abused in some cases? I think it is, actually. But I don't think you just decide one day to throw it all out. I think we've got to think through what are the unintended consequences of that? How might we treat this in a more nuanced way than just completely repealing Section 230?